Hi guys, let's start. Driss is taking his boss Philippe on a late-night ride across Paris. Driss begins to drive quite fast, evading other cars and disregarding traffic rules when waiting in line for traffic becomes too monotonous. Driss wagers €100 that he can escape the police's pursuit after they start pursuing him as a result. However, after driving under a bridge and being ambushed from both sides, the police finally catch up with him. However, Driss doesn't appear overly concerned, and this time he stakes €200 that he can arrange for an escort for them. When the police force him out of the car, he begins acting strangely, acting as though Philippe is incapable of moving, and tells the officers that he was driving Philippe to the hospital. The police locate this as demonstrated when they discover Philippe's wheelchair inside the truck and witness Philippe convulsing. The police excuse Driss for exceeding the speed limit because it was an emergency and offer to accompany him to the hospital. Driss plays September by Earth, Wind, and Fire to celebrate winning the wager, and as soon as the police have left and they are at their destination, he shares a cigarette with Philippe. Before the hospital staff could locate them, Driss makes a promise that he will handle the situation and drives them away. This friendship has been going on for a while. Interviews are being conducted by Philippe and his assistant Magilly to find a new caregiver for him. But things aren't going well because all of the candidates have very generic or odd responses to the interview questions. However, they are startled when Driss barges in, disregarding the fact that it isn't nearly his turn because he just needs some paperwork signed stating that they won't hire him so he can receive unemployment benefits. Although he is frank and a little impolite, even making advances toward Magilly, Philippe finds him funny and invites him to return the next day to pick up his completed documents. Driss returns to his modest home and struggles to take a bath as his younger siblings bother him. It is only thanks to his older sister Mina, who is more responsible, that he is able to finish in time. He sees his brother Adama getting out of a strange automobile as he waits for his mother to arrive via the window. Driss is even more certain that the child is up to no good when he enters the flat and just states that he was at school before taking his bag and leaving once more. When his mother shows up later that day, he gives her a Fabergé that he had stolen and responds to her inquiry by saying he had been on vacation. But even though he hasn't contacted her in 6 months, he has suddenly materialized at her house as if it were a hotel, and she isn't happy to see him. She throws him out and warns him not to return because she is so fed up with all of his lies and she has other kids to take care of. Driss spends the evening socializing with some neighbors while smoking and eating some goodies. The housekeeper Yvonne meets Driss when he returns to Philippe's residence the following day to pick up his paperwork. She gives him a tour of the property and describes Philippe's daily routine while also showing him the room with his own bathroom that he would be given. Before being brought to visit Philippe, who not only gives the signed piece of paper but also a job opportunity, Driss can't help but stare at the bathtub. Philippe offers Driss a bet that he won't last more than 2 weeks after he accepts the 1-month trial. Having brought his belongings to his room, Driss is instructed on how to care for Philippe. He has to learn how to put him in the wheelchair, keep his legs active, and assist him with bathing and getting dressed. Things become unpleasant when Driss learns that he must put on some high stockings and even clean his butt after Philippe uses the restroom. But despite his protests and vows to refuse, he eventually accepts those duties as part of his employment. Later that night, Philippe's daughter Alyssa and her boyfriend Bastien, who are looking for a quiet location to have an intimate moment, interrupt him as he is enjoying a snack on the roof. And after declining to share his beverage, he sends them both on their way. Even though he first makes some mistakes that he learns from, such handing Philippe the phone instead of placing it on his ear or forgetting the baby monitor while taking a bath, Driss rapidly adjusts to Philippe's daily schedule. The majority of the letters he opens for Philippe, but there are a number of private ones he isn't permitted to look at. He also learns to sort his mail into distinct folders. In contrast to Philippe's advice, he chooses to make a file just for advertisements for female escorts after finding one. Even though he keeps failing to get Magilly's attention, Driss still makes an effort to have fun. He occasionally calls escorts to join him in bed. After calling him out for being late one morning, Yvonne enters his room and discovers some potentially harmful items in his backpack without saying anything about them. Philippe needs to be driven around today, but Driss refuses to load him into a truck like he's cargo. Instead, he takes Philippe in one of the posh automobiles that rarely get use. Although Yvonne continues to disapprove, Philippe quickly becomes enthusiastic at the prospect of a faster, less boring ride after initially thinking this is inappropriate and that they should be pragmatic. When they attempt to exit the building, a neighbor is already parked there to find the warning sign posted on the door. Driss doesn't waste any time in pursuing the man, grabbing him by the front of his shirt and yelling at him until he moves the car. His deeds impress Philippe, but Yvonne disapproves once more. The two visit a museum where Philippe intends to purchase a work of art that Driss believes is unworthy of the money because it is merely a red splotch on the canvas. Following that, Philippe meets with a relative of his who informs him that everyone is concerned about Driss since he has a history of violence. He has also learned that he has a criminal history, but Philippe doesn't care because Driss doesn't feel sorry for him and enjoys making jokes with him. Driss and Yvonne have dinner in the kitchen while Philippe dictates a letter to Magilly after another failed attempt to hit on her. Yvonne switches off the baby monitor, saying it's a private talk, and starts outlining what's happening. The letters Philippe wouldn't allow Driss open were from a woman named Eleanor, with whom he is pen friends. But he has never actually met Eleanor, their communication is only through letters. Speaking of love, Driss makes fun of Yvonne for getting frequent stares from the gardener before bed. He's trying to fall asleep when the baby monitor starts making strange noises. Philippe is having problems breathing. Driss enters his room and, unable to ignore him no matter how hard he tries, gently leads him through the attack with soothing words and a wet cloth to wipe his face. Philippe ultimately nods off, but a few minutes later he wakes up once more claiming he needs air. This time, Philippe is placed on the wheelchair by Driss, who immediately wraps him in blankets and takes him for a stroll by the river. Philippe tells Driss that this is the first time in a very long time that he has seen Paris at night, and that he occasionally feels phantom agony because the medication can only do so much for him. Philippe also acknowledges that, due to his circumstances, he is unable to sexually assault a woman. However, because his ears are sensitive areas, he can still get some gratification while having them massaged. Driss shares one of his joints with Philippe, who is initially dubious but ends up liking it, as the phantom agony threatens to return. After that, they go to a restaurant where they laugh and eat while Philippe chooses to tell them more about his experience. His wife and he met while they were both students, and soon after they were wed, she suffered 5 miscarriages and was identified as having a fatal, incurable condition. They adopted Alyssa at that point. A paraglider satisfied Philippe's love of competitiveness, extreme sports, and speed. Even though he still believes that living without his wife is his true handicap rather than the chair, he crashed and broke his vertebrae while paragliding due to bad weather. After some more banter, Philippe recalls the time and understands that Driss has successfully completed his 1-month trial and is now officially employed. But he must first return the Fabergé egg he took from his wife because she would have given it to him every year, and he now possesses exactly 25 of them, which corresponds to the length of their marriage. The following day, Driss approaches Mina as she is leaving school. She is a little miffed that he hasn't responded to her messages other than to ask her to seek for the egg, and she also informs him that the police have been calling their house. He then goes to see Adama, who admits that he was discovered to be carrying 30 grams. Driss wants to take him to lunch, but Adama refuses and instead gets in the same suspicious car from before. Driss is then permitted to watch as Philippe dictates a letter to Magilly on behalf of Eleanor. He finds Philippe's purple prose to be extremely dull and feels that he should be more direct. He is also perplexed to learn that this has been going on for 6 months with no image exchange. He interprets it as a sign and phones her after finding her phone number on one of the letters, forcing Philippe to pick up the phone and finally speak to her verbally. Since their talk goes so well, Philippe calls her frequently now even before he and Driss go to the opera, where Driss giggles and makes fun of the clothes. The following day, Driss persuades Philippe to agree to a photo exchange with Eleanor and selects a shot of him using a wheelchair. Alyssa then barges into his room while he is painting to ask for cigarettes and mocks him for trying to be creative. He gets upset and throws her out before going to meet Philippe, who is now requesting that Yvonne replace the selected image with one of him when he wasn't quadriplegic. Just before Driss stormed in, ranting about Alyssa and insisting that Philippe should punish her position, Yvonne shares she hid the photo inside the escort file. Philippe consents to speak with her, but he is largely taken aback when Driss reveals that he has been painting. The time goes by, and Philippe and Driss' friendship deepens. Philippe buys him his first suit and chastises his daughter while Driss listens to him on the baby monitor. Driss takes him outside to play in the snow and takes him with him when he goes for a run. Driss exhibits his first picture to Magilly after finishing it, but she slaps him away when he tries to kiss her. However, Philippe claims he will make an effort to sell the painting since he enjoys it. The two of them like spending time together and doing fun things like sharing weed, getting faster cars, and even hiring escorts. When Philippe's birthday finally arrives, he isn't overly enthusiastic. Every year, he has to meet with all these relatives who only visit him on the date to make sure he's still alive while pretending to be startled that they are hosting a celebration. It will all be quite dull, according to Philippe. Driss searches for Alyssa in her room while he and the other guests listen to some live classical music. Alyssa is crying after taking some of Yvonne's medicines, which didn't kill her as she had feared. She wants Driss to speak with Bastien, who she believes is the cause of her sadness because he dumped her and called her a tart. Driss agrees to do so for a fee. Philippe manages to persuade his relative to purchase Driss artwork for 11,000 euros while he is still doing this. When Driss returns to the dining area, Yvonne tells him that although Magilly is in a relationship with Fred, things are now pretty difficult. This information gives Driss optimism. Philippe forces Driss to listen to some of the most significant pieces of classical music history as the celebration starts to wind down, but he can only chuckle in response. He brings his iPod and plays Boogie Wonderland by Earth, Wind, and Fire after the band has finished playing before he starts dancing in the middle of the floor. He is a fantastic dancer, and Philippe enjoys seeing him get the other party members to dance with him as well. Driss reads the most recent letter Eleanor wrote to him later as he is putting Philippe to sleep. She sends him a picture of herself, which reveals that she is quite attractive, and suggests that they meet up when she visits Paris the following week. On the actual date, Yvonne and Driss try on dozens of costumes for Philippe before settling on the ideal one. Driss takes his day off to visit Bastien and threatens him until the youngster agrees to apologize to Eliza and to bring her croissants every day. He also asks him to fix his hair because Yvonne will be the one driving Philippe to the day. He then pays a brief visit to his mother at work, but merely to observe her from a distance. Eleanor is really late, so Yvonne and Philippe are waiting for her at the restaurant. Philippe gives up after waiting for an hour, phones Driss to come get him, and then exits the restaurant without realizing Eleanor is also arriving at the same time. The following evening, Driss receives the proceeds from the sale of the photograph from Philippe in his personal aircraft, making him incredibly delighted. The following morning, when they are in the countryside, Philippe decides to go paragliding and drags Driss along. Although Driss doesn't want to participate after initially freaking out, he actually finds the experience enjoyable. Adama is waiting for Driss when they arrive home and gets chastised when he notices the scars on his face. Though Adama continues to refuse to tell Driss what is going on in his life, the doctor makes him wait in his room while he contacts Mina to reassure her and puts Philippe to bed. But Philippe hasn't yet fallen asleep. He asks Driss about his family after forcing him to gaze at a painting alongside him. At first, Driss resists the question, but eventually yields. Adama is officially not his brother, and his parents are actually his aunt and uncle instead of his parents. His original name is Bakary Bessari, but because other children had that name, they nicknamed him Idris, which later became Driss. They brought him back from Senegal when he was 8 because they were unable to have children. When his uncle passed away, there were other men and more children, and one day his aunt suddenly became pregnant. Philippe points out that Adama needs to be disciplined, just as Driss had spoken to him about Alyssa, so he fires Driss so he can be with his family because he can't spend his entire life caring for an elderly guy. The following morning, when Bastien has brought his usual croissant and has styled his hair better, Driss packs his luggage and prepares to go. When Driss tries to hit on her one last time, Magilly introduces him to his significant other Fred, which is short for Frederic. Turns out Magilly isn't interested in men, and Driss gives up on the spot. On his way out of the house, he returns the baby monitor to Yvonne and teases her for lying to him about Magilly just to mess with him. In exchange, she gives him the escort file he had started, and he is disappointed to discover that the picture he had chosen is hidden within. Driss discards the file, but keeps the photograph for himself. When he gets outside, he finds another car blocking the entrance, so he asks him to move. If he no longer works there. Driss says it's a matter of principle when Adama calls him out on it. A few hours later, the two brothers go to the station to pick up their mother. While back at the house, Philippe is having his first dinner with his new caretaker, who is stuffy and boring, and Philippe decides to leave him without even taking a bite. Nobody is around to chastise him because Yvonne is out on a date with the gardener. Driss gradually returns to his previous life. he reconnects with old friends and tells the men in the suspicious car not to bother Adama any longer. When he goes to an interview for which he lacks the necessary experience, he persuades the employer by referring to himself as pragmatic and employing all of the art knowledge he gained while working for Philippe. This results in him getting a job as a driver. Philippe continues to dislike his new caregiver and is constantly irritable. When he refuses to let anyone in the house help him with his phantom pain one night, Yvonne calls Driss and asks him to come over. That's how they ended up in the situation in the first place, with cops chasing them down and later escorting them to the hospital. Driss drives Philippe to the coast after that little adventure, and the sight of the sea helps Philippe relax. Later, Driss trims Philippe's overgrown beard before taking him to lunch, but he doesn't stay because someone else will be keeping Philippe company today. Driss wishes him luck and finally returns his egg before departing, and Philippe begins to worry about being alone until he sees who his date is, Eleanor, who is overjoyed to see him and doesn't mind the chair at all. Count Philippe Pazzo di Borgo, the real Count Philippe Pazzo di Borgo, now lives in Morocco, has remarried, and has 2 daughters. The real Driss Abdel Yasmin Selou owns his own firm and is married with 3 children. To this day, the 2 men are very close friends,